He humiliated his pregnant wife in front of his friends, laughing at her unemployment, never realizing that by tomorrow he'd learn the hard way that betrayal and greed always come with a price. The air buzzed with the hum of conversation, the clinking of glasses, and the occasional burst of laughter from the dining area. The scent of expensive cologne, roasted steak, and aged whiskey filled the space, mixing with the faint trace of Claire's vanilla perfume as she stood near the bar, her fingers wrapped around a crystal glass of water. She wasn't drinking, of course. 6 months along, her belly a soft curve beneath her silk dress, she had long since grown used to passing up the expensive wines and liquors that filled their cabinets. She had also grown used to nights like this. Daniel holding court, his voice just a little too loud, his jokes a little too cruel, his confidence stretching far beyond its limits. He looked every bit the charming executive, a man who knew how to command attention. His colleagues, men who thrived on power, money, and status, leaned in whenever he spoke, eager to laugh, eager to agree. "And let me tell you guys," Daniel said, flashing a grin, "marriage? It's a hell of a deal if you play it right." He gestured vaguely toward Claire without looking at her. "I mean, look at my wife. She's got it easy. No stress, no deadlines, just hanging out at home, relaxing all day." Laughter rippled through the table. Claire tightened her grip on her glass, her jaw locking for half a second before she forced herself to take a slow breath. She had mastered this reaction by now, this quiet, practiced stillness. She knew exactly how to hide the sting, exactly how to let the words roll past her without letting them stick. One of Daniel's colleagues, a broad-shouldered man with slicked back hair, smirked and took a sip of his drink. "So what does Claire do these days?" he asked, his voice carrying just enough condescension to make it clear he already assumed the answer. Daniel leaned back, shaking his head with mock sympathy. "Oh, you know," he said, dragging out the words. "She's taking it easy these days. Pregnant, you know. It's her full-time job." Another burst of laughter. Someone raised their glass. "Must be nice," one of the men chuckled. "Wish I could get paid to nap and eat ice cream all day." Claire swallowed. The water in her glass felt heavier somehow, colder against her palm. She had learned long ago not to react, not to give Daniel the satisfaction of seeing if his words landed. He never said these things in private. Oh no, he saved them for moments like this, when he had an audience, when he could make a spectacle out of her. She turned slightly, pretending to adjust the bracelet on her wrist, stealing a glance at Daniel from the corner of her eye. His face was relaxed, smug, his hand resting lazily against the arm of the chair. He looked so sure of himself, so certain of his place in the world, so convinced that she was nothing more than an accessory to his success. The irony of it all nearly made her laugh. Her entire world, the home they lived in, the luxuries he flaunted, the very job that paid for the whiskey in his glass, was built on her empire, her intelligence, her power. And yet, in this moment, in this room filled with men who thrived on ego, he had reduced her to nothing. A woman with no job, no ambition, no worth beyond the child she carried. Daniel turned toward her suddenly, a lazy grin pulling at his lips. "Hey babe," he called, waving her over as if she were a waitress. "Why don't you come say something? You've been awfully quiet over there." Claire lifted her chin, her smile small and unreadable. "Just listening," she said smoothly. Didn't want to interrupt all the wisdom. The sarcasm barely registered with him. He just smirked and turned back to his friends. "See, she knows how lucky she is." Someone nudged his shoulder. "Seriously, man, you've got it all. Gorgeous wife, a baby on the way, a big promotion coming up." Claire didn't miss the way Daniel's chest puffed just a little at that last part. "Yeah," he said, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "It's a lot to handle. The bills, the mortgage, the baby. It's all on me." The friend must have said something back because Daniel laughed again, lower this time. "I mean, I can't carry Claire forever. After the baby, she's gonna have to get off her ass and do something." Claire's breath caught in her throat. Daniel kept talking, oblivious to the fact that his entire world was shifting in that moment. She knew these men, knew their type. They had no idea the woman standing in the room with them had built something greater than any of them ever could. She wasn't just a wife, wasn't just pregnant, wasn't just someone living off her husband's generosity. She was their boss, and tomorrow, they would all find out exactly what that meant. Before we dive in, let me know where you're watching from. And if you believe that karma always finds its way, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more stories of justice served. Claire sat in the dim glow of the nursery, her hands resting on the curve of her belly. Daniel was still in the dining room, laughing with his friends, probably pouring himself another drink, basking in the attention that he thought he had earned. She let out a slow breath, tracing small circles over her belly, grounding herself in the moment. It wasn't just about revenge. This was about something bigger, something she had seen coming for a long time. She thought back to the day she met Daniel, how simple everything had seemed back then. She had just finished a late meeting at Blake Enterprises, slipping out of the boardroom with the kind of exhaustion that came from making million-dollar decisions while pretending they didn't weigh on her. She had needed coffee, something strong, something that would push her through the next round of negotiations, and that was when she saw him. Daniel had been standing outside the cafe near her office, talking animatedly on the phone, grinning like he had just won the lottery. He was younger then, a little rough around the edges but full of energy, full of ambition. She had stepped inside, ordered her coffee, and before she even turned around, he was there, flashing that easy, confident smile. "Rough day?" he had asked, nodding toward the way she had been rubbing her temples. "You could say that." He had leaned in a little, lowering his voice like he was letting her in on a secret. "Let me guess. Terrible boss? Too many deadlines? I hear freelancing is the way to go." The words had hit her harder than they should have. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the way he had said it so casually, so sure of himself. But she had made a split-second decision. She didn't correct him. She didn't tell him that she wasn't answering to some terrible boss, that she was the boss. Instead, she had nodded, giving him a small, tired smile. "Yeah, something like that." She wanted to know what it was like to have a conversation with a man who wasn't trying to impress her, who wasn't calculating her worth based on her net worth. Daniel had been charming, easy to talk to. He had dreams, big ones, the kind that made his eyes light up when he talked about them. He wanted to climb the corporate ladder, wanted to prove himself, and Claire had found herself drawn to that energy, to the way he made the world sound simple, like success was just a matter of pushing hard enough. For the first time in years, she let herself step out of the role of CEO and just be Claire. Not the woman who made board members nervous, not the woman whose decisions shaped entire industries, just Claire. A woman figuring things out, a woman with no power, no pressure, no walls to keep people at a distance, and it had felt good. She had let it happen, let the lie stretch out longer than it should have. One date turned into 2, then 3. Before she knew it, they were staying up late, talking about everything and nothing. He made her laugh, made her feel like she wasn't carrying the weight of an empire on her shoulders. And when he talked about his dreams, she had admired that fire in him. But looking back now, she realized that fire had never been about building something. It had always been about having something, about owning something, or someone. Their relationship moved fast. Within a year they were married, and for a while, Claire let herself believe she had found someone who understood her, who saw her as an equal. But then, little things started to shift. The way he spoke about work, how he brushed off his colleagues' contributions, and made it sound like every success belonged to him. "My team," he'd say with a laugh, shaking his head. "Please, if I wasn't there, they'd be running in circles." Claire had smiled the first few times, not thinking much of it. Confidence was attractive after all, but soon, she realized, Daniel didn't just want to succeed. He wanted to be the reason things succeeded. He didn't just want to climb the ladder. He wanted to be the only one on it. Then there was the way he talked about other people, especially the ones he thought were beneath him. Waiters, assistants, junior employees. He treated them like they were props in the background of his story, like their struggles were amusing at best, inconvenient at worst. She would sit across from him at dinner, listening as he talked about his latest brilliant move at work, how he had saved a project that was doomed until he stepped in. She had known, of course, known that his big ideas weren't his own, that the credit he was taking belonged to other people. She had seen the reports, the emails, the late-night memos from his team members doing the real work, and yet Daniel sat there, sipping expensive wine she had paid for, acting like the world should be grateful for his genius. "You wouldn't understand," he had said one night when she asked him about a deal that fell through. "It's just business. There's a lot of pressure at my level." Claire had stared at him across the candlelit table, pressing her lips together to keep from laughing. Her level? If only he knew. He was good at playing the part, though. He had mastered the language of corporate ambition, the firm handshake, the confident stride, the way he could make people believe he was smarter than he actually was. And maybe that was why she stayed as long as she did, because part of her wanted to believe that Daniel was still the man she met that night at the rooftop bar. But then, one day, she realized something else had changed. He had stopped asking about her. In the beginning, he used to ask her questions, what she wanted, what she dreamed about. But now, he just assumed. He assumed she was content, assumed she had no ambitions, assumed that she was lucky to have him. One evening, she had been sitting on the couch, half listening as he went on about some executive meeting, when he looked over at her and said, almost absent-mindedly, "It must be nice, you know, not having to worry about a career anymore." She had blinked, turning to him. "What?" Daniel had given her a small, indulgent smile. like he was talking to a child. I mean, you don't have to stress about all this. You get to relax. Focus on the baby. You don't have to prove yourself like the rest of us. Claire had stared at him, something tightening in her chest. Not have to prove herself? She had built an empire. And here was Daniel, her husband, acting like she was some kept woman, living off his so-called success. That was the moment something inside her snapped. She had let this go on for too long. She had watched him build a career on stolen credit, watched him climb a ladder he didn't even know she had built. She had stayed silent, let him believe in his own self-importance, let him gloat about being the provider while he spent her money, lived in her home, worked at her company. He had spent years making her feel small, making her seem invisible, but no more. The next morning she made a call, a quiet, deliberate request to her private investigator. "I need you to dig deeper," she said, her voice calm, steady. "I don't care what it costs. I want every detail, every secret, every lie." Inside her private office on the top floor of Blake Enterprises, Claire sat at the long, sleek conference table, her fingers lightly drumming against the smooth surface. Her team was already in place. Sarah, her head of legal, was going through the final stack of documents, her sharp eyes scanning every line for any possible loophole. Across from her, David, head of security, leaned back slightly in his chair, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Sophie, Claire's most trusted assistant, sat to her right, scrolling through emails on her tablet, her brow furrowed in concentration. The air in the room was thick, humming with the weight of what they were about to do. Claire exhaled slowly and looked at Sarah. "Tell me we have everything." Sarah didn't look up as she flipped another page, nodding. "We have everything. The offshore accounts, the falsified expenses, the unauthorized transactions. It's airtight. He won't have a legal leg to stand on." The first report came back with something small, an offshore account, a hidden stash of money Daniel had been quietly building, transferring funds little by little. At first it seemed like nothing, a little extra on the side, but the more they dug, the more the picture became clear. It wasn't just his money, it was her money. Money siphoned from corporate accounts, disguised as expenses, hidden beneath layers of paperwork that most people wouldn't have looked twice at. Except Claire wasn't most people. She knew the inner workings of her company better than anyone. Daniel had been stealing from Blake Enterprises, and it didn't stop there. There were emails, conversations with competitors, small leaks of information disguised as casual remarks. "I hear Thorne & Company is struggling with their next phase. Maybe a strategic buyout could be in play." Nothing blatant, nothing that could directly tie him to sabotage, but enough to confirm what Claire had started to suspect. Daniel had never been loyal to his company, to his colleagues, to her. Claire swallowed back the satisfaction threatening to rise in her chest. And his termination? Sophie pulled up the document on her tablet, turning the screen toward Claire. "Finalized, effective immediately. Fraud, breach of contract, and corporate espionage. Everything's been reviewed by HR, and we've prepared the official notice to be sent out to the board once he's escorted from the premises." David cleared his throat, leaning forward. "Speaking of which, my team is ready. Security will be stationed outside the executive conference room at 9 a.m. sharp. As soon as you give the signal, we'll make sure he doesn't cause a scene." Claire allowed herself a small nod. "He'll try to, though. You all know that, right?" She glanced between them. "He won't go quietly." Sarah smirked. "He can throw as big of a tantrum as he wants. It won't change a damn thing." Sophie let out a quiet breath. "I still can't believe he was dumb enough to think he could get away with all of this." Claire tilted her head slightly. "It's not just about getting away with it. He actually thought he deserved it. That's the part that gets me." She tapped a finger against the table, voice quieter now. "He spent the last 3 years rewriting reality in his favor. In his mind, he's the hero of his own story, the provider, the self-made man, the one taking care of the fragile, dependent wife who needs him." She let out a small, humorless laugh. "And tomorrow, he's going to wake up thinking it's just another day." Sophie scoffed. "He's going to lose his mind when he realizes what's happening." Sarah shut the file in front of her with a sharp snap. "And I can't wait to watch it." There was a brief silence before David spoke again. "You're sure you want to do this yourself?" Claire looked at him. "Absolutely. You don't have to," he continued, his tone even. "If you want, we can handle it. Deliver the papers, escort him out, let him figure out the rest on his own." Claire shook her head. "No, he needs to see it. He needs to hear it from me. After everything he's said, everything he's done, I want to be the one to take that last piece of power away from him." David gave a slow nod of approval. "Then we'll be ready." Sophie glanced at the time on her tablet. "It's almost 1. Do you want us to stay and go over anything else?" Claire took a deep breath and stood, rolling her shoulders slightly. "No, we've covered everything." She glanced at Sarah. "File the final report and have the board on standby for an emergency meeting right after. We'll need their signatures to finalize the official separation." Sarah nodded. "Consider it done." Claire turned to David. "Brief security again in the morning. Make sure every floor is covered. I don't want him trying to sneak into his office or destroy anything on his way out. Already on it." Sophie hesitated, then leaned forward slightly. "Claire," she paused, choosing her words carefully. "Are you okay?" Claire stilled for a moment, then let out a quiet exhale, offering Sophie a small smile. "I will be." The room fell silent again, but it wasn't tense. It was steady, resolved. They all knew what tomorrow meant. One last time, Claire glanced at the termination papers on the screen. She reached for her phone, scrolling to the last text message she had sent Daniel earlier that evening. "Don't wait up for me. Big day tomorrow." A fitting last warning. Daniel stepped into the sleek, glass-walled boardroom with the confidence of a man who believed he was untouchable. He adjusted the cuffs of his expensive suit, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. His reflection flashed in the long, polished table as he strode in, flashing a grin at the room full of executives, ready to hear the news he had been waiting for. Today was his day. He had been expecting this meeting for weeks. Subtle nods, casual mentions, the way his superiors had started treating him with just a little more deference. He had worked for this. He had played the game, shaken the right hands, taken credit where it was needed, stepped on whoever he had to in order to get here. And now, he was about to be promoted to senior vice president. The thought sent a rush of satisfaction through him as he ran a hand over his tie, straightening it as he stepped forward. Then he saw her, Claire. She was standing at the head of the table, calm, composed, dressed in an elegant but severe black suit. She looked like she belonged there, like she had always belonged there. His smirk faltered for just a second before he caught himself. "Claire," he said, chuckling as he took a few steps closer, glancing around the room. "What are you doing here?" No one laughed. No one smiled. Something was off. The energy in the room wasn't what he had expected. The usual relaxed arrogance of his colleagues had been replaced with something colder, something unreadable. The air was heavy, thick with something he couldn't quite place. Claire didn't move. She didn't smile. She didn't soften the way she usually did when he walked into a room. Instead, she looked him straight in the eye and said, "Daniel, you've been stealing from this company." Silence. Daniel blinked, his mind scrambling to make sense of the words. He let out a small laugh, shaking his head. "What?" "As of this moment," Claire continued, voice steady, "you're fired." The words hit him like a slap. The boardroom was deathly silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the city beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, the distant noise of an office that was still moving while his world came to a halt. Then she moved, sliding a thick folder across the table toward him. It landed with a soft but heavy thud, and for the first time in his life, Daniel felt something sharp and unfamiliar twist in his chest. Fear. He stared down at the folder, his hands frozen at his sides. Claire tilted her head slightly. "Go ahead," she said, her voice smooth, almost amused. "Open it." Daniel hesitated. He didn't want to, didn't need to. He already knew. Somehow, some way, she knew. But he couldn't just stand there. Slowly, stiffly, he reached for the folder, flipping it open with fingers that had gone cold. His eyes scanned the first page. Expense reports, transfers, bank accounts he had thought were untraceable, emails, conversations he had long since forgotten about, laid out in crisp, damning clarity. And then, the message. "I think I've hit the jackpot with this one. If I play my cards right, I'll never have to work again." His stomach turned to stone. He looked up sharply. Claire was watching him, eyes unwavering, unreadable. "How?" he started, his voice hoarse before stopping himself. He knew how. She had played him. For 3 years, she had let him believe he was the one in control. Let him live inside his own delusion, while she gathered everything she needed to burn his world to the ground. His breath came out in a short, sharp exhale. "Claire," he tried again, pasting on a strained smile. This is ridiculous. Whatever this is, whatever you think you have, I can explain." "I don't need you to explain," she said simply. "The evidence speaks for itself." He turned to the board, looking for some kind of lifeline, some kind of support. "Gentlemen," he started, his voice regaining some of its usual confidence, "we all know the decision is final." It was Richard, the CFO, a man who had always greeted Daniel with firm handshakes and polite nods. But today, his expression was cold, detached. "The board has reviewed the evidence," Richard continued. "There is no appeal." Daniel's pulse pounded in his ears. He turned back to Claire, his expression darkening. "You can't do this," he said, his voice lower now, more dangerous. Claire smiled then, just barely. "I already did." The door behind him opened. 2 security guards stepped inside, their presence a quiet but undeniable force. One of them, a tall man with a firm stance, nodded toward Daniel. "Mr. Morrison," the guard said, voice professional, almost too polite. "Please come with us." Daniel didn't move. He was still processing, still fighting against the reality of what was happening. He clenched his jaw. "Claire, you don't want to do this." She exhaled softly, almost as if she were bored. "I really do." One of the guards stepped closer. "Sir," Daniel flinched at the word. Sir, the title that used to carry weight, authority, power. Now it was just a formality, a hollow sound with nothing behind it. His fingers curled into fists. His pride screamed at him to fight, to argue, to demand an explanation. But there was nothing to argue against. The evidence was all there, spread out before him, undeniable. Claire watched him for another moment, tilting her head. You should go now, she said softly, before this gets any more embarrassing for you. The final nail. Daniel swallowed. For the first time in his life, he had nothing to say. Slowly, stiffly, he straightened his tie, squared his shoulders, and turned toward the door. As he stepped past her, Claire spoke one last time. Oh, and Daniel? He paused. She smiled. Don't forget to turn in your key card. A muscle ticked in his jaw, but he didn't turn around, because it was over, and she had won. Daniel sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. His mind was spinning, his heartbeat a rapid, erratic thud against his ribs. He had spent the last hour making calls, one after another, each one ending the same way. I'm sorry, Daniel. There's nothing I can do. I have to distance myself from this. This isn't a good time. Excuses, rejections, people who once laughed at his jokes, clapped him on the back, toasted to his success. Now they wanted nothing to do with him. He took a shaky breath, scrolling through his contacts, eyes darting over names that just yesterday would have answered his calls without hesitation. Now, most of them sent him straight to voicemail. Cowards. He tried again. This time Richard, one of the board members, the same man who had sat across from him at countless dinners, who had once said, Daniel, you've got a bright future here. The phone rang. Once, twice, a click.
Richard, listen, this is all a misunderstanding. Claire.
A sigh. Daniel, don't. Daniel clenched his jaw. You know me. You know this isn't how I operate. This whole thing is her trying to humiliate me. You and I both know how these things go. A woman gets emotional. She blows things out of proportion. A sharp inhale. Silence. Then, Richard spoke, his voice clipped. Let me stop you right there. This isn't Claire blowing things out of proportion. This is you getting caught. And if you think throwing around misogynistic bullshit is going to fix it, then you're dumber than I thought. Daniel's stomach twisted. Richard, I can't be associated with you. And if you call me again, I'll have my lawyer issue a statement saying I was unaware of your actions. Do you understand? Daniel opened his mouth, but the line went dead. His hand trembled as he dropped the phone onto the passenger seat. His jaw tightened, his vision blurring at the edges. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. He sucked in a breath and reached for his laptop, balancing it on his lap as he logged into his private banking account. The numbers would be there. They had to be there. Loading. The screen flickered. Access denied. Daniel blinked, refreshed the page. Account frozen. Contact bank representative. His pulse spiked. He opened another account, the offshore one, the one no one was supposed to know about. Locked. His breath came short now, ragged. This wasn't just Claire getting even. This was systematic. She had planned every step. She had anticipated his next move before he even made it. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, but his mind was already screaming at him. He needed another way out. His jaw clenched. If Claire wanted to play dirty, then so would he. He pulled out his phone again, scrolling through encrypted contacts until he found a familiar name. A competitor, a company that had been circling Blake Enterprises for years, desperate for inside information, desperate for leverage. His hands were still shaking when he hit dial. The phone rang twice before a voice answered, smooth and calculated. Didn't expect to hear from you, Morrison. Daniel forced a smile he didn't feel. Let's just say I have some information that might be valuable to you. A pause, then a low chuckle. That so? Claire isn't as clean as she seems, Daniel said, gripping the phone tighter. I have files, emails, client lists. You help me, and I help you. There was silence on the other end. Daniel's heart pounded. Then, click, the line went dead. He pulled the phone away, staring at it in disbelief. He redialed, but the call wouldn't go through. His number had been blocked. Daniel's mouth went dry. He barely had time to process it before another buzz. This time, a text from Claire's legal team. Nice try. Let's not make this worse for you. His stomach twisted into knots. They knew. They already knew. He ran a hand down his face, breathing hard. There was only one move left. The media. Journalists loved stories like this. A corrupt CEO. A scandal. If he could spin the narrative before Claire did, he could salvage something. Maybe not his job. Maybe not his reputation in the corporate world, but at least he could make her look just as bad. He scrolled through his contacts again, finding the number of a reporter who had covered corporate scandals before, the kind who didn't care about facts as long as the headline got clicks. The phone rang. Hey man, Daniel said the moment the reporter picked up. I have a story for you. The real story. The reporter didn't respond right away. There was a long, uncomfortable pause before he finally spoke. You mean the same story Claire's team just handed over? Daniel froze. Yeah, the reporter continued, almost amused. She beat you to it, buddy. Gave us everything. Every document, every file, every little detail. It's airtight. Legally, ethically, you're done. There's no counter story here. Daniel's fingers tightened around the phone. That bitch. Look, the reporter interrupted. I'd be careful if I were you, because from what I've seen, the only person whose reputation is about to burn here is yours, and it's going to burn fast. Daniel's entire body went cold. Another beep, another notification. He looked down at his screen, his breath hitching as he saw the first headline pop up. Daniel Morrison terminated from Blake Enterprises amid fraud allegations. Another. Inside the fall of a corporate executive, how greed led to a downfall. His stomach lurched. The news had already broken. Claire hadn't just ruined him. She had erased him before he even had the chance to fight back. His phone slipped from his fingers, clattering onto the floor of the car. Daniel stared ahead, chest rising and falling in shallow, uneven breaths. Everything was gone. And the worst part, it had never even been a fight. Claire had ended him before he ever had a chance to swing back. She sat in her office, the city stretched out before her. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, the email open in front of her, the words sharp and damning. If she's rich, I win. If not, I'll make sure she stays dependent on me. The date in the corner of the screen burned into her mind, months before their wedding. Her breath came out slowly, carefully measured, but her hands were shaking. It was strange, really. She had already known what kind of man he was, had already seen the truth laid out in bank statements, fraudulent transactions, whispered meetings behind closed doors. She had already accepted that Daniel was selfish, that he was a liar, a thief, a parasite clinging to power he had never actually earned. But this was different. The way he had looked at her, spoken to her, touched her, the way he had held her hand across the dinner table, leaned in to whisper in her ear at parties, kissed her forehead in the morning before heading off to work. Every I love you. Every I've got you, babe. A calculated lie. She closed her eyes, but the memories kept coming. Daniel, kneeling in front of her the night he proposed, sliding the ring onto her finger, looking up at her like she was his whole world. Daniel, pulling her into his arms after their wedding dance, murmuring, "We make a hell of a team, don't we?" Daniel, resting his hand on her stomach when she first told him about the baby, grinning as he said, "You don't have to worry about a thing. I've got us." She had believed him. For years, she had told herself that there was something good buried beneath his arrogance. She had explained away the little things, justified the moments of condescension, excused the dismissive words, convinced herself that his love was real. But no, he had never loved her. Not really. He had chosen her like a businessman chooses an investment, calculating the risks, weighing the benefits, deciding that whether she was rich or not, she would be useful to him. Her throat felt tight. She glanced back at the screen, rereading the words, making sure she wasn't imagining them. If she's rich, I win. If not, I'll make sure she stays dependent on me. Her hand curled into a fist, nails digging into her palm. She had never been dependent on him, not for a single second, but he had wanted her to be. He had wanted her small, weak, trapped in a life where he was the provider, where he had the power, where she needed him. He had planned for that, and when it didn't happen, when she continued to be her own person, when she didn't shrink the way he had expected her to, he resented her for it, mocked her, dismissed her, laughed about it with his friends. A small, bitter sound escaped her lips, something between a laugh and a breath. The love she had for him, the last fraying thread of it, snapped. She let go of all of it, the memories, the doubts, the part of her that had wondered, in some distant corner of her mind, if maybe there was something worth saving. There wasn't. There never had been. She reached for the mouse, fingers steady now, and clicked delete. The email vanished from the screen, disappearing into nothing, just like Daniel would. Daniel sat on the edge of the motel bed, staring at the peeling wallpaper, his phone clutched tightly in his hand. The dim yellow light buzzed above him, flickering every few seconds, casting shadows that made the room feel even smaller than it already was. The TV was on, volume low, but he could still hear the words. Former Blake Enterprises executive Daniel Morrison faces formal charges of corporate fraud after an internal investigation revealed. He closed his eyes, willing the words away, but they kept playing. Every news channel, every business site, his name dragged through the mud, his career burned to the ground in real time. A week ago, he had been untouchable, a rising star, the kind of man people wanted to be around. And now he was a joke. He exhaled sharply, opening his phone again, scrolling through his contacts. He needed someone, anyone, to pick up. He tried Richard, straight to voicemail, tried Mark, blocked. He clenched his jaw, scrolling further. These were his friends, his colleagues, the same people who once drank with him, toasted to his future, told him he was destined for more. Where were they now? He tried another. Finally, someone answered. "Hello?" The voice was cautious, like they had answered by accident. Daniel forced a chuckle, gripping the phone tighter. "Hey man, it's me." A pause. "Yeah, I know." The hesitation in their voice sent a fresh wave of anger through him. "Listen," Daniel continued, keeping his tone light. "You know how the media is. They blow everything out of proportion. I just need a place to land for a bit, figure things out. Maybe you've got something at your firm?" "Daniel," the voice on the other end sighed, and he already knew what was coming. "Look, I can't. No one wants to be associated with this. It's too messy." "I've known you for years," Daniel said, his voice dropping, desperation slipping through despite himself. "You're really going to turn your back on me?" "I have to think about my own reputation." And that was it. Daniel pulled the phone away from his ear, staring at the screen as the call disconnected. They were all gone. He tossed the phone onto the bed, running both hands through his hair, breathing hard. He had one last option, one last person, his mother. His hands felt numb as he dialed, his chest tightening as it rang. Once, twice. Then she answered. "Daniel," he almost sagged in relief. "Mom, thank God. I need to talk to you." A beat of silence. "I saw the news," she said. Daniel swallowed. "It's not what it looks like, okay? Claire, she set me up. She turned everyone against me, froze my accounts, made me look like some criminal." "Did she make you steal from your company?" Her voice was sharp, no warmth in it. His stomach clenched. "Mom, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly." Daniel gripped the phone. "I just need a place to stay for a bit, just until I figure things out." "No." The word hit him harder than he expected. He let out a weak laugh. "No?" "You made your choices," she said, voice cold. "You put yourself in this mess, and you can get yourself out." His throat tightened. "Mom, come on. I'm done cleaning up after you," she said. "Don't call again." The line went dead. Daniel let the phone slip from his fingers, staring at the stained carpet beneath his feet. This was it. He had lost his job, his money, his friends, his reputation, and now, even his own mother had turned her back on him. A muffled laugh escaped his throat, bitter and humorless. Just days ago he had mocked Claire for being jobless, dependent, a woman with nothing. And now he was the one with nothing. Claire stood by the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of her office, watching the city below, the same city that had once felt too small, too stifling, like it belonged only to men like Daniel, but not anymore. Now, it belonged to her. The door behind her opened, and Sophie stepped in, holding a fresh copy of Forbes in her hands. She didn't say anything, just walked up to Claire's desk and placed the magazine down with a small, satisfied smile. Claire turned, eyes falling on the glossy cover. There she was, sitting in the very chair she was standing beside now, poised and confident, a knowing smile on her lips. The headline stretched across the page in bold, unmissable letters. "The woman who built an empire in silence." She ran her fingers over the smooth cover, a quiet hum of pride settling in her chest. "They wanted to go with something dramatic for the title," Sophie said, amusement in her voice. "The phantom CEO who outsmarted the corporate world. But I told them this was better. More you." Claire chuckled softly, flipping the pages until she found the article. The first few lines made her pause. For years, Claire Blake watched, listened, and waited. While the world believed she was simply the wife of an ambitious executive, she was, in reality, the force behind one of the most successful corporate expansions of the decade. Now, for the first time, she steps forward, not just as the woman who took down corruption, but as the leader who is reshaping the industry itself. She let out a slow breath. This moment, this was what she had been working toward. Not revenge, not Daniel's destruction, but this, the rebuilding, the transformation. HR finalized the new policy updates, Sophie continued, sitting across from her. The extended maternity leave, the increased support for working mothers. Everything's rolling out next quarter. Claire nodded, flipping the page. And the mentorship program? Already oversubscribed. Women across every department signed up the moment the announcement went live. Some of them, they actually cried. Sophie smiled. It's the first time they've felt like someone at the top actually sees them. Claire's chest tightened, but it wasn't with sadness. It was with purpose. This was what mattered. Not just proving Daniel wrong, not just exposing the men who had underestimated her, but making sure no other woman had to sit in a room full of men and feel small. She had spent years pretending to be powerless. Now, she would use that time, that experience, to ensure that no woman under her leadership ever had to do the same. Sophie tapped the magazine. They want a follow-up interview, something personal. They're calling you the most elusive CEO in modern business. People want to know who you are, Claire. Claire tilted her head, considering. For years she had stayed in the shadows, orchestrating everything from behind closed doors. It had given her an advantage, but now she wasn't hiding anymore. "Set it up," she said, closing the magazine. Sophie grinned. "Already did." Claire let out a small laugh, shaking her head. She turned back toward the window, watching the city move below. Blake Enterprises was thriving. The toxic leadership was gone. The company was stronger, smarter, better. And as for Daniel, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above Daniel's head as he stood behind the counter of the electronics store, scanning yet another item with the lifeless beep of the register. A pair of earbuds, a phone case, a pack of AA batteries, the kind of things he never used to think twice about. "That'll be $42.99, he muttered, not bothering to look up. The customer swiped their card, barely acknowledging him, and Daniel handed them their receipt with a hollow smile before they walked away. This was his life now. The store wasn't big, just another chain electronics retailer with shelves stocked high with gadgets he used to replace without thinking. Now, he spent his days under these cold, artificial lights, wearing a cheap name tag that read, Daniel, Associate, taking orders from a 23-year-old manager who barely had any work experience. It wasn't supposed to be like this. A year ago, he had walked through glass-walled offices, shaking hands with powerful men, drinking whiskey in penthouse suites, making deals over steak dinners. A year ago, he had been someone. Now, he had to ask teenagers if they wanted to add a 2-year protection plan to their purchases. His jaw tightened as he glanced at the line forming at the register. Another customer stepped forward, setting down a magazine alongside their items. Daniel's stomach clenched. Claire's face stared up at him from the glossy cover. Women who built empires. He swallowed hard, his fingers stiff as he picked up the magazine, scanning the barcode without meeting the customer's eyes. "Hey," the guy in front of him said suddenly, tilting his head. "You look familiar." Daniel's grip on the magazine tightened. "Weren't you that big-time executive?" The guy squinted, snapping his fingers as if trying to remember. "Yeah, Daniel Morrison, right? You worked at, what was it?" Daniel forced a thin smile. "I used to." The customer nodded slowly, eyes flicking down to the magazine in Daniel's hands before letting out a small chuckle. "Damn, that's gotta suck." Daniel said nothing, just handed him his receipt. The guy took his bag and walked off, still shaking his head. Daniel set the magazine down beside the register, unable to stop himself from looking at the cover again. Claire, looking calm, powerful, successful. He could still hear her voice in his head. "You should go now, before this gets any more embarrassing for you." He had thought he would find a way back, thought he would recover. But now, a year later, he knew the truth. There was no coming back from this. Claire hadn't just ruined him, she had erased him, and worst of all, she probably hadn't thought about him since. The nursery was warm, the soft glow of the lamp casting golden light over the room as Claire rocked gently in the chair, cradling her newborn daughter in her arms. The baby's tiny fingers curled and uncurled against Claire's chest, her breath soft and steady. Claire ran her fingers along her daughter's delicate cheek, smiling as she watched her sleep. "We're going to be just fine," she whispered, pressing a kiss to the baby's forehead. Then, with a quiet strength, she smiled. "No, we're going to thrive." And for the first time in a long time, Claire didn't think about Daniel at all.